Hi! Welcome to a new episode of History in 7 Facts, the show that aims to explore some interesting episodes of humanity's past. Check out this playlist to watch the entire series, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. The magnificent city of Florence is considered to be the birthplace of the Renaissance. The city is home to some 50 galleries and museums, sumptuous homes, palaces, and churches. For centuries, historians have told that this was the epicenter of Europe's rebirth, the restart of art, science, and education in the 14th century. This cultural movement marked the end of the medieval times and the birth of modern Europe. The arts have changed drastically, from the simple, flat Byzantine style to the styles we are used to today, rich in perspective and realism. But it seems that this movement may not have started in Florence. The rediscovery of an artist from Rome that lived before the Florentine masters could rewrite the history books. The nomination of Florence as the start of the Renaissance started with Giorgio Vasari's book, The Life of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors and Architects, from 1550. Vasari invented the genre of artistic biographies and was the first to use the term rebirth in print. He stated in his book that the Florentine artists, especially the painter and sculptor Giotto di Bondone, were the precursors of the movement. Ever since, this point of view has become a historical fact. Despite the fact that Giorgio Vasari is one of the most famous and respected art historians of the world, he was far from being impartial. He was born in Assisi, but lived in Florence and was a passionate supporter of his city. Furthermore, his patrons were the powerful House of Medici, and in fact his famous book was dedicated to Cosimo de' Medici, a powerful banker and politician, the one who transformed his family into a powerhouse. So you could say that Vasari was strongly influenced by his patron, and in this light, his book looks more like propaganda than historical fact. However, it needs to be said that the influence of Giotto di Bondone is not exaggerated. His works of art prove his genius, and he clearly influenced many artists of the time and contributed greatly to the start of the Renaissance. In his works you can clearly see change and innovation. The way he used light and perspective made its paintings look more real and three-dimensional. He was more than likely the first Florentine artist to use these techniques and made them popular, but he was certainly not the first in the world. So who started it all? Pietro Dj Ronnie, nicknamed Cavallini, is not a well-known artist today. Not much is known about his personal life, except that he was born in Rome in the 1240s and lived to be over 100 years old. But in his time he was regarded as one of the greatest artists to have ever lived. He was considered a master of the arts and one of the most prolific painters in the Italian peninsula. When Giotto was a child, Cavallini was at the peak of his glory, and his works of art more than likely influenced Giotto, who we know visited Rome at the time. But somehow, Cavallini's contribution was forgotten, and today barely anyone knows he ever existed. One of the reasons why Cavallini is no longer a reputed artist is because most of his creations are no longer around. He worked on countless churches, but when these paintings deteriorated, they were painted over by newer ones, thus hiding Cavallini's work. Just 100 years after his death, the destruction of his paintings was a well-known problem and one that wasn't stopped. Giorgio Vasari mentioned him in his books, stating that one of his great works in the Basilica of Maria in Araceli was now destroyed by the passage of time. But in the year 2000, a historian working in the same church rediscovered a fresco showing a Madonna with a baby. Dated to the year 1290, it proves that Cavallini was already using perspective and light to give dimension and realism to his paintings, a technique that was not supposed to be in use until several decades later by Giotto. This work of art was finished exactly when Giotto visited Rome, so it's quite possible that he drew inspiration from Cavallini's work. The fresco isn't Cavallini's only painting in the church. Other paintings show him using perspective in a technique called trompe d'oeil, literally meaning to deceive the eye, an optical illusion that depicts objects in 3 dimensions. There are several other paintings in the city that show the mark of Cavallini. Of course, like any other great artist, he didn't work alone. There was a collective of painters that worked with him and learned from him. Thus, Cavallini was the mentor of a group that laid the foundations of the Renaissance. Giotto's teacher was Ceni di Pepo, known as Cimabue, a Florentine artist. They worked closely together, but their styles did not resemble at all. Cimabue couldn't use perspective correctly, as you can see in this painting from the San Francisco Basilica in Assisi. His style, while beautiful in its way, was traditional and medieval. Giotto, however, was able to create much more realistic paintings with correctly proportioned pieces to give the illusion of 3 dimensions. He did not learn this from his teacher, that's a certainty. In the same period, Cavallini, while working in Rome, was already able to create radically different paintings and was able to give perspective to the human body like no other before him. Giotto and his fellow artists from Florence took over these techniques, perfected them, and greatly popularized them. Once this new style had spread, the old Gothic, flat style of the medieval times fell in disuse. The Basilica of San Francisco is about halfway between Rome and Florence. Inside, there is a fresco depicting the life of Saint Francis and is considered to be the first Renaissance fresco. Giorgio Vasari, the historian, attributed this work to Giotto, but that might not be the case. These paintings show the marks of Cavallini and his followers from Rome. Some parts are almost identical to paintings we know belonged to Cavallini. Even if it wasn't him who worked in the basilica, it's obvious that it was done by members of his school. The debate is of course still ongoing, but it is important. The Renaissance marked the beginning of a change that first manifested itself in the arts, but then slowly spread to science and politics. It literally changed the course of history and slowly dragged Europe out of the Dark Ages. So who started it all? Well, you could say that the Renaissance began when Giotto came to Rome and saw the face of an angel painted by Cavallini. Thank you for watching this episode of 7 Facts. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe it even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked this video, please thumbs up and subscribe. While you're downstairs, let me know what you think about this video. Please consider visiting my Patreon page and become a patron. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.